Alrighty, I got my nicotine pouch. I got my Zero Ultra for breakfast. Uh, let's get this started. There's a lot of words here in this document. I do want to apologize for uploading a PDF to the Underkeep Discord. I didn't think about the potential security issues that come with that because I'm used to dealing with, regular people and not the people that pretend to be regular that go on the internet. I get it. There's a security issue there, so I'm just going to be ripping all of this out and pasting it as plain text in the Discord with images attached for all of the images. That was a pain in the ass. But this video is going to be for people that don't want to sit down and actually read everything, because reading's for nerds, and I talk like a retard. Or rather, I type like one. Well, not both. Both. Either way. I get some of that sip in me. I want to start with the intro, though. Like right here, it says, as someone who wasted a large portion of my life dedicated to martial arts, Monk and Fighter are my favorite classes to play in fantasy games. This document is a proposed outline for how Monk can be implemented into the dark fantasy setting of Underkeep. I did actually, ever since I was young, I was always kind of really big into martial arts. I grew up on Mortal Kombat and Kung Fu movies, and, as I got older, I started doing, like your basic karate and shit, but that was expensive. It was expensive, and why would we pay for that? I used to fight a lot when I was a kid. I basically would get suspended from school for beating up bullies a lot. And then when I got out of school, I still used to find excuses to get into fights with, like, the high school football, and wrestling team assholes. But that's neither here nor there. I also moved on to weapons martial arts. I basically threw away my 20s couch surfing and swinging sticks. I'm a huge martial arts guy. I didn't even start buying guns till I had a functional sword in my life. That's another thing. I'm really big into, firearms too. I figured that's also a martial discipline. If you can't hit a fucking target at 50 yards with a pistol, you're not a proficient shooter. Like, that's like the bare minimum level. If you can't hit a target at 50 yards with a pistol, there's something wrong with you. You need to fix it. And it's the same thing to learn how to throw a punch. But let's get all that out of the way, and we'll actually start going over the Monk, right? So when it comes to the stats, I think vitality, strength, and dexterity should all be above average. Okay, the Monk is not, the strongest. They're really not. They're strong. Don't get me wrong. They have to be. These are people that are training themselves to be the pinnacle of physical fitness. They should have high stats across the board. But the highest stats they have should be agility, willpower, and perception, in my opinion. Not the strength, not the vitality, not the dexterity. Intelligence, it should be a little higher than average. Charisma should absolutely be a low stat for them. These people cloister themselves away in these monasteries, training their minds and their bodies to be peak levels of, like, what is possible for a mortal. I'm not going to say human, because we're going to have non-human monks as well. But cloistering yourself away from the rest of society doesn't exactly make you a very charismatic person. And really, what good is social interaction when you're seeking enlightenment and the cultivation of a stronger body and mind? Monks should have generally pretty high stats, and the way I reason that, monks are not going to have access to a lot of the gear that a lot of other classes are going to have. They're not going to be able to, wear plate. They're not going to be able to wear any armor. If we had my way, monks are not going to be able to wear any armor at all. We'll get to gear in a second, but for now, I want to make it very clear that monks should have high stats. They should be fucking terrifying at low levels. Like, the average fighter and barbarian should probably be afraid of monks in, like, the lowest quality gear. But once gear becomes more widely available for, like, fighters and barbarians and the other martial classes, the monks should rely more on their, techniques, abilities, and mobility rather than just beating the shit out of people. So for gear, I recommend no armor. Cloth gear, but no armor. So they should be wearing things like robes and frocks, and basically nothing else. Trousers are fine. That's fine. you know, as long as it's cloth pants and not, you know, like leather slops or anything like that. Monks should actually have access to daggers, just non-parrying daggers. Not the daggers that have like basket hilts or anything like that. They're designed to be an offhand defensive option to be paired with a primary weapon. They're not really... That's not really the kind of thing you think of when you think Shaolin martial arts. You think more like the butterfly knife. And I don't mean Balisong butterfly knife. I mean like the really big, broad... You fight with them in pairs. But that's neither here nor there. I don't expect those to be in the game, so I won't even recommend them to be added or implemented in any way. But quite literally, monks are going to learn how to fight with daggers. That's just a reality. Monks should also have access to single-hand cut and thrust swords. The closest comparison to what you would normally see, like in the 9 hard weapons of Shaolin, would be like an arming sword. Because this is very much dark fantasy, it's very medieval European, I don't expect them to add a bunch of Chinese weapons specifically for monk. That would be a silly thing to ask for. They should also have access to single-handed broadswords like the falchion, because it's very comparable to a dao. It's just a big blade, you know, like it's heavier, it's made for cutting, it's a single-handed sword. This is something that monks would necessarily be trained in the use of. Spears. It's a big pointy stick. The spear and the staff are basically something you expect a monk to be trained in. There's no arguing that. If you think otherwise, you don't know anything about martial arts, you don't know anything about monks, and you probably never played Dungeons & Dragons. I'm sorry, monks can use spears, it's just a quarterstaff with a pointy bit, okay? If quarterstaff is in the game, then go ahead and give it to monks. If it's not in the game, that's fine, we don't need it. It was one of my favorite weapons in Dark and Darker. I would love to see it show up in Underkeep, but I understand if it's not going to, but I'm just saying, if it's in the game, monks have to have access. Hell, it's one of the few weapons the majority of people that don't understand monk as a class or archetype would agree that they should have. I think monks should have access to throwing knives. They shouldn't have access to lots of ranged weapons, but at least let them throw knives. Not just because it's, you know, a kind of niche, cool skill to develop that something a monk would probably do. It's just badass. I love throwing knives. I learned to throw knives in real life. I can throw pretty much anything with a point on it at this point, because I spent like 3 years autistically training to throw knives. So I'm pretty good at that now, and I figure, you know, monks can figure it out too. Look, throwing knives are badass. Please let monks have this. They don't need a ranged option. You can take it from them. I get it. I just strongly advocate for it and recommend it. And the most controversial piece of gear I think I'm going to be advocating for monks to have is the halberd. Monks are trained in pole arms, like pole axes, and like the Yanwan Lao, or the Pudal, they're going to be using these poles. And, you know, weapons similar to the halberd, like the ji, for instance, have been a big part of, you know, ancient Chinese warfare and martial arts for a very long time. I understand most people don't think halberd when they think monk. I don't care what you think, I care about what fits. Anyways, that's monk. Basically no armor ever, so your damage reduction is basically non-existent. They're going to be a little tougher than your sorcerer or your wizard, but they're not going to be taking too many hits for sure. But we're going to move on to unarmed combat, and this is where we start to get into our graphics. I use Dark and Darker as a comparison because it's a shared experience that most of us have, if not all of us at this point. The type of punch being thrown in Dark and Darker was a hook, and the orientation of the fist was a false punch. It's where the fist is horizontal. It's made it so that the knuckles strike, you get, just more power in the punch. A false punch kind of more evenly distributes the force throughout the fingers, but you sacrifice a lot of power in doing that. And if you see here in this diagram, I show a diagram of a proper punch, or false or true punch, as shown in like Wing Chun, for instance. Some of you may have heard Wing Chun because it's like the style that Bruce Lee, for instance, was trained in before, you know, he developed Jeet Kune Do. I think monks should be throwing a true punch, a straight, like, you know, just like you would see in Wing Chun, just like in this diagram. Not just because it's going to be slightly faster than the hooks, the false hooks that you see in Dark and Darker, but also because it prevents collision with the environment when it's just straight as opposed to being a wide arc. And I figure that type of punch should be unique to monks on the grounds that that's kind of their whole thing. Like, any dipshit can just kind of swing wildly. These guys are striking with precision and with power and with speed. It should be faster, and it should be more direct. They should have more of an option to fight unarmed than everyone else. And we'll get to, you know, me advocating for a subclass that focuses on unarmed strikes. But now we're going to get into the complicated parts. And, boy, this was a pain in the ass, especially looking for just basic pictures. I feel like monks should have access to a spell wheel like technique wheel. They should have a spell memory like technique memory with 5 slots, 1 for each of the 5 elemental energies. And I was too lazy, and, well, it wasn't just laziness. This is going to sound stupid. Me explaining the difference between these 2 punches, I went into super autistic detail and it took me like 3 hours, and I realized if I started talking about the elemental energies, I was going to get caught up in a bunch of wuxing bullshit and traditional Chinese medicine and philosophy, and I just stopped myself. I just copied shit from the internet to save myself from having to write up all this bullshit and trim the fat. And these aren't really in cyclical order as they should be. I actually went based on the complexity of the techniques I proposed in the document. So we're going to start with wood energy. Now, wood is about strength and flexibility. It's about striking with limbs. It's about being springy and making fast, powerful movements. Not short ones, but, you know, wider, straighter ones. Fire energy relates to speed. It's being dynamic and fast. It's about throwing lightweight jabs. Like, you want to get those hits in now. You want to get them in faster. Metal is your slower, stronger, more powerful strikes, and you'll see a lot of like precise, like pinpoint, like finger strikes, for instance. A lot of people don't believe that that's a real thing, but if you've ever fucking jabbed somebody like under the ribs with just your fingertips, it works. It works really well, actually. Finger strikes are a real thing. But metal is going to be your real strength, power, your armor piercing, you know, that's the element that's going to be hitting hardest. Earth, on the other hand, it's also heavy and powerful, but earth energies are more what you would express in, like, grappling. You know, when you're throwing someone to the ground, like quite literally using the ground. Or a lot of, like, earth energy techniques you would be using, like, rely on you, like, keeping your center of gravity low and shifting your weight by using your stance, like, connected to the ground in order to generate more force. And I kind of put that down here above energy. Like I said, I didn't follow a cyclical order because when it comes to the techniques, earth is where things start to get complicated and difficult to program. And I really feel guilty about that, but I just couldn't think of anything better. Water is about wider circular fluid movements. You see a lot of that in like Baghua's, like circle walking, for instance. I did include a technique that's quite literally just called circle step, based on that. It has a lot of downward energy, you know, a lot of circular movements. You see a lot of it in like Tai Chi forms. If you just do a quick Google search and you don't really pay attention, you'll see, you know, some of these wider arcing movements that are nice and slow and fun to look at. When you speed it up, that's a real thing. Like when I used to get in fights with fucking high school dickheads on like the wrestling team and the football team, the styles I focused on most were Tai Chi and fucking Baji. And yes, I did learn this through books. mostly, but that we're getting off topic. So we're going to start getting into these techniques, and again, I said we're going to be pulling up like a spell wheel, more or less, for all of these different techniques. For the first two, they're going to be wood elemental, type attacks. First, we've got here a flying kick. Pretty straightforward. You jump, you kick, you travel a distance to hit a target. There's not going to be any knockback or anything. It's just there to help you close the gap and deal some damage. You shouldn't hit harder than your standard punch. I don't want monks to be too powerful. I think monk should be the weakest class in the game. They should have lots of options for skill expression, but they shouldn't be able to just overwhelm people with power like other classes will as they become more powerful. Monks should simply gain more options as they become more, in quotes, powerful. But after the basic flying kick, you're jumping, you're kicking, we've got front kick. It's going to have more reach than a punch, obviously. It's not going to do more damage than a punch, but it is going to apply a decent knockback. Ideally, this is going to be used like to interrupt a swing, like let's say a barbarian's trying to hit you with a big old poleaxe. You just bust out the front kick. It doesn't interrupt the animation of them swinging their axe, but it'll push them back far enough to where they're not actually hitting you anymore. It'll force people out of measure. And in emergency as hell, you could even use it to save somebody. I mean, if you know someone's about to take some damage, you just hit them with a quick front kick and knock them out of whatever they're about to get hit with. You'd rather get hit by what feels like a punch than fucking a fireball or something, right? So now we're moving into the fire element. I show here snap punch, and like this is Jeet Kune Do, strike, pull back. It should just be one quick little jab, where you just move it in, you step in. Yeah, it's going to be a slight, small gap closer. It's basically there to just catch people off guard, get some quick damage in. It gets you in their face, it gets light damage in. It's going to hit a little less hard than a regular punch, because this is more about speed than it is about power. After that, we've got rapid jabs, and it's going to take the same approach to less damage than... and I apologize for the graph, it's probably not the best example. But basically, you're going to be throwing these Wing Chun-style punches in rapid succession. Just 4 of them. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. You're just going to rattle them off. They're all going to hit less hard than a full-on, regular, unarmed attack from a monk. But the thing is, they're going to come out fast. You're going to get multiple hits in. You're going to be dealing more damage than you were if you were to just sit there and throw out basic attacks. From here, we'll move on to our metal techniques on the technique wheel here. And we're going to start with piercing strike, like I mentioned with finger strikes. I've done it, it works. So the idea here is that you're going to be, dealing damage over time to unarmored opponents, because to simulate, like, internal bleeding, more or less, or just the pain of bruising, right? Not a lot. I want it to be a very small amount of additional damage on top of the strike. But it should be slightly higher than a standard punch. Like, this is a powerful technique. You're really driving your fingers straight into the dude. Like, you want to hurt him bad, you're going to do that. Especially if you're like a fantasy monk that trained your body to become an actual weapon. This will actually immobilize the monk for a second. You're going to stand still, you're going to tense up, and then you're going to strike. It's going to be a little harder to land, but it's going to be, a damage-dealing tool. It's there to deal damage. Next, we've got Crushing Fist. And I could have used a better... I could have used a better graphic for this, but the thought of this full-on dude just blasting a fucking woman in the face with a fucking straight just... It was really funny to me when I found it. So let's put it in there. Equal rights, equal fights. There's gonna be women in the dungeons, right? But this is actually gonna be an animation, just a straight false punch. Not the true punches that we've been seeing so far. If I scroll up to, Wing Chun here, see how his fist is oriented, vertically. The false punch would be horizontal. So you're throwing, you root yourself, you step in, you take one straight, powerful punch. It's going to basically just be a standard punch with armor penetration. And you are going to step in for the strike, and you'll knock them back, just a little bit. the distance that you step forward to throw the punch. So it won't be like as powerful a knockback as we see up here with these wood techniques that are made for actually making space. It's just going to be there to just, really sell the idea that you really fucking hit somebody really hard. And now we get into the complicated ones, the ones that I feel guilty about recommending because it puts a lot of stress on development. Some people want all kinds of wacky, crazy shit in their games. I want wacky, crazy shit too, but I want to be as practical and realistic as possible. I don't want to bog down the development team with all kinds of wacky, best case scenario animations and mechanics. I just want to try and keep things as basic, as simple as possible. So I call this move Stifling Step. It's not unique to Bajichuan. There's lots of different, styles that utilize this same basic concept, where you're stepping in and you're forcing your arm across the upper body of another person that's attempting to attack you. It's basically just there to completely interrupt somebody and throw them off balance. The way I want this technique to work is that during startup animations, like when you see someone's getting ready to swing, you basically step in and you stagger them a little bit and you force them to kind of like trigger as if they were to have hit the environment with startup animation for their attack. Kind of like if you go for an overhead swing and the back of your axe hits the wall behind you. This technique would basically just be you forcing that kind of reaction and applying a little bit of stagger. Not like heavy stagger, just a little stagger, throw them off balance, give you a free punch in, or give one of your teammates a free hit, After that, I recommend what I call the Stonewall Step. There's lots of different bodily collision moves like this and lots of different forms of martial arts. Basically, you're going to be stepping in quickly. You're going to get low, you're going to move in, and you're going to strike with the shoulder, your arm, and your hand to apply stagger and just knock back. This is going to be pushing somebody away from you and off balance. Now, mechanically, the idea of staggering somebody, pushing them back, isn't really complicated. My real issue with it is, the fact that the dev team is going to have to animate it. And again, that's a big concern of mine with all these recommendations. I don't want any of this to really... I don't want to put too much work on them, and I don't want to, demand hey, you guys have to fucking work yourselves into the ground to give me my perfect, fantasy monk. I'm trying to be a little more grounded and realistic here. And as a side note, neither the Stifling Step nor the Stonewall Step would actually deal damage. They're non-damaging moves. They're just there to provide crowd control and for damage mitigation, more or less. They're very defensive in nature. Moving on to water, I recommend the Circle Step. So basically when it's activated, you'll press either the, strafe left or strafe right key, and the character will make a quarter circle movement around basically the space that could be occupied by, a player-sized object. It's going to be a wide circular movement, a quarter circular movement, and it would force the viewer to turn their camera 45 degrees in the direction opposite the direction they moved, quite literally forcing you to make a wide circle step around to the side of whoever it is you're squaring up with. This doesn't do damage, it's just there to be evasive and to give you mix-ups and mind games when you're engaged in combat. It's pure movement. After that, I have here the Cloud Hands technique. It's just, a very simple defensive technique. I took 4 little screenshots of a guy actually performing this form in Tai Chi, and the idea of it is that you're moving the back of your hands across your upper and lower body in circular motions in order to deflect and brush away any strikes. I know this is going to be complicated to implement, but this technique should not work on horizontal attacks. Anything that's swinging from side to side that's trying to hit you, you're not really brushing that away. But something that's coming vertically, like straight towards you, like an overhead swing or a thrust, can be brushed aside and is no longer actually swinging into your center mass when it's being brushed aside like that with the back of the hands. This is basically like a block that actually prevents damage, but as mentioned, it can't work on a horizontal swing the physics there just doesn't really add up. You're just going to get hit. And I do advocate that this actually does block projectiles like arrows, for instance, because they are moving in a straight line towards you, just like a thrust would, just, at range. So this is going to be your main defensive tool against people with spears and bows. It doesn't do damage, again, because it's a purely defensive technique. It's just there for damage mitigation. After that, we're going to move on to techniques and weapons, because I mentioned before, monks should have access to weapons. If you're using a two-handed weapon, like a staff, spear, or a halberd, you should only really have access to flying kick, front kick, and circle step, as shown above. And it's not that we can't add more techniques later. Okay, it's just that these are the ones from the list that I've recommended for the base bare minimum to get monks started that would be compatible with two-handed weapons. I'm not saying this is the be-all end-all, don't ever add stuff. I'm saying based on what I have presented, these are the only things that would be compatible with a two-handed weapon. When it comes to one-handed weapon, or any thrown weapon, basically just knives, you have access to flying kick, front kick, snap punch, circle step, and cloud hands, because the cloud hands technique is actually something you practice, with a sword, like a single sword. It's basically the same thing, just now you have a sword. So you don't really have nearly as many options when you're holding a weapon, but I mean, it makes sense. I'm trying to, you shouldn't have access to all of your punches on top of having a sword. I mean, come on. It's just a little balancing thing there. But that brings me to chi and stances. I don't think monks should be able to use their techniques infinitely forever for free. They shouldn't be able to spam them and just drown people in actions and power. That's silly and ridiculous. Monks should have a resource that they pull from that should limit the amount of times they're able to do these things. I'm not advocating for a stamina system in the game, because I understand that stamina systems are actually bad. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but if you played enough Mordhau, or if you played enough Chivalry, you know that it has a deleterious effect on the actual combat experience. It kind of forces PvP fights to go slower, and it's just going to bog down PvE. I really don't want to see it. But I do want to see resource-driven abilities. So here, everything would have a chi cost, and you would need to recover your chi between fights in order to be able to get up there and start using all of your techniques again. And I feel, spellcasters should be the same way, either by classifying spells by level and giving people a certain number of, level casts, kind of like Dungeons & Dragons. Maybe a system that, Dark and Darker had, where each spell has an individual spell cost per spell, or your number of casts per spell, or just a mana bar. You need mana to cast spells, each spell costs a certain amount. That's fine, and I feel like that would work perfectly fine for Monk. Stances, on the other hand, I want to make this very clear. I don't want the team to have to go out of the way to animate different types of stances and different types of movements. None of that. Just make it a self-applied buff based on the techniques being employed. So in the case of using wood techniques, if you were to use front kick or flying kick, as listed above, you get a small increase to your jump height and unmitigated backwards movement. Because as it stands, walking backwards is always going to be slower than walking forward. Monk's wood stance would allow them to walk backwards at the same speed that they move forward to help them create distance and, be more mobile in combat. And, also jumping height. I mean, you can do some wacky stuff by jumping a little higher, right? So we get a fire stance. When you're using the snap punch, or when you're using rapid jabs, you'd be getting a small decrease to your unarmed damage. Or not even just unarmed damage, just a small decrease to damage in general. But in exchange, you're getting a small increase to your attack animation speed. And I want to make this very clear, it's attack animation speed, not all action speed. It shouldn't be everything the monk can do, it's just attacking that gets slightly faster, at the expense of slightly lower damage. To keep in theme with, fire. For steel, you get a small decrease to your action speed. All actions, not just attacks. in exchange for a small increase to your damage. You're being slower, you're being more powerful, you're striking harder. And I also recommend that it gives a small amount of damage reduction, because you're more rigid, you're taking those hits, you're tanking blows, and you're returning them with power. Also with Earth Stance, I advocate for a small decrease in movement speed. You're more rooted, you're more grounded, you're not moving as quickly, and you should get an increase to damage reduction. It's also a more defensive style, even more than Steel, you could argue. You're ready to tank those hits. Granted, I don't want these numbers to be big, mind you. I'm thinking like 5%. I want these buffs to be, the stance buffs to be small numbers, unless you focus on them and master them through perks. Then they get bigger, then they get more useful, but even then, it won't compare to actually wearing armor, to be perfectly fair. But one big thing I want to see is resistance to knockback and stagger. Not immunity, but resistance. For instance, if a monk in Earth Stance gets hit by a monk in Wood Stance that uses, like, front kick, for instance, I want the Earth Stance monk to not be pushed as far as somebody who is not, getting the effects of an Earth Stance buff, For the Water Stance, I want to see a decrease in damage, just because I feel like that kind of fits thematically, in exchange for unmitigated lateral movement. Now, I'm not sure how Underkeep's going to handle movement, but I'm a big advocate for strafing from side to side, being slower than moving forward. It just is. That's physics. That's biomechanics. You can't get around it. But monks, training themselves to the peak, the pinnacle of physical fitness, being able to do something that's basically not possible to people that haven't dedicated their lives to cultivating themselves like that, sure, let them have their little extra movement there. I also want that buff to decrease the chi cost of the further use of water abilities. So when you're getting really defensive, you want to be moving, you want to be more evasive, you want to be preventing damage. Staying in water stance and using your water techniques more often is a great way to do that. It won't really help you end the fights by killing people with your bare hands or anything, but it'll help keep you alive. And that's kind of, how I want that stance to go. So you've got Chi as a resource that you spend to activate these different techniques, and you've got stance buffs that are applied to yourself after activating those techniques. And I want to make it clear, I don't want these buffs to be permanent. I want them to be a decent duration, but they should wear off eventually so that between fights you're not in a stance because you're not actively in combat, So from here we're going to move on to perks. I just created a couple. It's so easy to make tons of perk ideas, especially when I'm not working with hard numbers. But I'm going to run through these really quick. We've got Iron Fist. Unarmed attacks get a small, and I want to really emphasize that, I put it in bold for a reason, small, all caps, flat damage increase. I want Iron Fist to just be giving you like a flat, maybe 2 or 3 extra points of damage. It should not be a big number. And it should prevent you from equipping weapons. If you want the Iron Fist, if you want to be the guy who punches people to death, you don't need a sword. You're here to punch people to death. It prevents the equipping of weapons. Maybe, we'll make an exception for throwing weapons, maybe, but I'm not so sure. Elemental Affinity. Now this one, it just says, meaning there would be an entry for each element, and that's kind of what I was talking about with the stances earlier. So this would double the bonuses and the duration of a specific stance buff. So you would choose, like, Water Affinity, or maybe we could call it Focus, if you really want to double down on your defense. Or, Wood Focus if you want to jump even higher, Fire Focus, or Affinity if you really want to, be there and punching, and you want to be fast, and you want to be hitting people. And mind you, it says double the bonuses, so it wouldn't double the penalty you get to your damage, it would just double that small increase to your attack speed. And I'm talking like 5%. You go from 5% to 10%, that's when you really start to see, a difference. But that's neither here nor there. With Calm Mind, reduce the potency of charisma-based effects and increase chi regeneration when out of combat. I could have worded that a little better. It should be one sentence and then another sentence. But Yeah, Calm Mind should be there to make you more resistant to the types of spells and abilities that things like bards, liches, ghouls, like wights, anything that uses any kind of charisma-based negative effect. Calm Mind should be there to help you overcome that, considering the abysmally low charisma stat the monk has. And also, it should help them regenerate chi outside of combat. Greater Fortitude, a flat HP increase, not a big one. I wasn't sure how to go with the numbers there. It should be considerable. Like, you should look at that and think, yes, this is going to help me with survivability, but it shouldn't be so big that it's mandatory, you know? It'll add a small damage reduction increase, and I mean small. I'm talking maybe 3%. Not a lot. Like, it shouldn't be a lot, but it should, make you a little tougher. And it should reduce the potency of damage over time effects. And this is the part I feel is like the most important of Greater Fortitude. Like, if you get poisoned, and that poison is like 5 damage per tick for 5 seconds, or 5 damage per second for 5 seconds, that's 25 damage. If you're reducing the potency of that, it would be like 2 damage per second instead of 5 for 5 seconds. Mind you, it's not reducing the duration, but then again, duration could be part of potency. I don't know, that's really up to the devs, but I feel like Greater Fortitude should be there to help monks, overcome things like burning, poison, bleeding, any of these damage over time effects that could be really taxing for other people. The monk is able to just power through with their Greater Fortitude. And this is something that could also just be, applied to, like, Barbarian, for instance, just to show how tough they are, but that's neither here nor there. Peak Physique. Increase all stats by a small amount and reduce the potency of slow effects. I'm saying, like, maybe +2 to all stats. Just, like, being slightly better than the other monks. The big thing being reducing the potency of slows. Because you're really just going at it. You are peak physical fitness. You shouldn't let the things that slow everyone else down slow you down nearly as much. A more situational and fun one, I thought it would be Way of the Talon. Way of the Talon. Like birds. At a small amount of flat damage. I'm not talking a lot, just a small amount. To attacks performed while the monk is in the air. So if you do like a jump and then punch, or jump and then kick, or even flying kick would automatically apply this because the jump is part of the animation, you just get a little extra damage sprinkled on top. If you really want to be jumping around and mobile and like jumping over people's shields to punch them in the head, that's going to reward you for that kind of playstyle. So we move to Dragon's Will. Unarmed attacks now scale with willpower and not strength. So as it stands, obviously the stronger you are, the harder you hit. Dragon's Will is going to say, actually, we're getting a little magical in this bitch, and we're just going to use willpower. This is Magic Punch. It's kind of straightforward. It's not unheard of in games like Dungeons & Dragons to have, the more mystical aspect of Monk brought to the forefront. And we'll be getting to that when I go to the subclasses. After that, we've got 18 arms, and that's a reference to the 18 armed disciplines of Shaolin martial arts. The 9 hard weapons and 9 soft weapons, 18 arms. And just remove the movement speed penalty when performing attack animations. So not the movement speed for having a weapon out, but just slightly reducing the movement speed penalty of actively attacking to really help you stick to your targets while fighting with a weapon. Not big enough to be game-changing and broken, just, just a little perk. And so far, those were just like the general perks that would be available to the monk class. I'm going to give an example of one subclass-specific perk for each subclass that I have proposed in the document. Like right here, we have Elemental Mastery. This would be one that's available to the Mystic Monk that I mentioned before, and you can see here in the document. It increases the potency of the selected stance buff even further. And the potency could include duration. It could just include the bonuses. We'll see. But it does require that you have elemental focus, and that's the thing. Up there I put affinity, over here I put focus. I couldn't really pick which word to use. Maybe focus is better, I guess. I use both interchangeably. Sorry for being bad at this. But basically, you get your elemental mastery after you have one of those stance buffs that you prefer. And that's something that's going to be amplified and emphasized when you take the Mystic Monk class, which is going to be based around like willpower and, you know, the more magical aspect of Monk. And that's why you're going to be getting actual sizable use out of the stance mechanic. Or the stance buff mechanic, I should say. The stance buffs become really good as an elemental monk. Your pee-pee poo-poo damage resistance from Earth Stance suddenly becomes somewhat respectable damage reduction. You're still not going to be up there with like the fighters wearing plate, for instance, but you'll be tankier for sure. Dragon's Legs. Increase the potency of kick techniques. And that could just be damage. It could include the knockback from front kick, for instance. I just said potency because this could, you know, improve kicking in multiple ways, not just the damage. And then over here we have Shadow Walk. Greatly reduce the sound of movement. Not crouch movement, not sneaking, just movement. You're super light on your feet to the point where you even prevent triggering of floor traps. Like a Shadow Walk monk should be able to just run right over spike traps. They should do so quickly. They should do so quietly. You don't even know they're there until they jump your ass. Not necessarily because they're going to be like, you know, a rogue replacement that can actually hide. But, you know, just a little bit of stealth, you know, to really emphasize their ability to play the role of a mobile support class. Someone who's going to be traversing the map faster and giving information to their allies, spotting and responding to ambushes, for instance, rather than just being guys who deal damage. And that's one thing I really wanted to focus on in this document, is that Monk's techniques and stat blocks and everything is going to be more about them being able to support a party than it is to be about them going around killing everything. But going on to the subclasses, Mystic Monk, the one I mentioned before, they'd be amplifying the stance buffs. Like, for instance, with Wood, you know, you get a small amount of bonus physical damage added to attacks in the Wood stance. With Fire, a tiny amount of burning is applied to attacks, because you're getting kind of magical now. You got Fists of Fury and Flames. When you throw those 4 jabs out, that's 4 stacks of pee-pee poo-poo burning damage. But it adds up. The more you do it, the more they burn. I just don't want it to be a lot. Like, you have to really build those stacks if you really want to burn somebody. But it's nice, you know, a way of really expressing how magical the Mystic Monk is without making them too powerful. Metal, small amount of armor pen added to unarmed attacks. That means all of your punches are going to be getting just a little more armor pen to really rattle people's cages when you're punching them in a helmet, you know? And that's just when you're in metal stance, of course. I mean, if you use another technique to get out of metal stance, you don't really get that bonus anymore. This is true for all the stances, mind you. For Earth Stance, Stagger is added to your heavy attacks and techniques. So if you use a technique while in Earth Stance, it'll just increase the amount of stagger you're already applying from your Earth Stance techniques. And if we eventually add Earth-style techniques that don't have stagger, it will apply stagger. It should add stagger resistance, not immunity. So you're further improving the stagger resistance that is already there from the Earth stance when you go for the mastery, that is. And with Water, you get a small amount of magic damage added to your unarmed attacks, and this is going to be there specifically to compensate for the loss of damage that comes naturally from the Water stance, to really sell the point that, hey, you're not just a magic monk, like, you're really hitting people with your magic when you're taking the softest, most evasive and defensive of the stances. The next subclass I have proposed is Dragon Warrior, and this is going to be the punchy, kicky guy. This is the class for the people that want to actually jump around punching people to death. Class based around unarmed combat. Dragon Warriors would have access to perks that reduce the chi cost and increase the potency of techniques. These guys want to be using techniques more than everyone else. I don't think they should be able to infinitely spam them to the point where they become broken, but they should be able to do more in combat with their techniques than everyone else. And they won't be allowed to equip weapons. Like, in order to be a Dragon Warrior, you must permanently have the Iron Fist perk just glued to the class. Once you choose Dragon Warrior, there's no going back. You are stuck punching and kicking your way to success. And then going back to the perk Shadow Walk that I mentioned before, you'd have Shadow Warrior. This is the class based around stealth and mobility. Not true stealth, going invisible and hiding like a rogue does, but just being more quiet, harder to detect, increasing your mobility, and improving your damage with one-handed weapons. Basically like a diet ninja. You know, the Shadow Warriors should go fast, they should go quiet, and they should be able to, you know, Uno reverse any ambush and just hit people in the back of the head with a sword, more or less. And of course, there's room for more. I just figured that these are the 3 that I recommend that aren't too crazy, too wacky, or too wild. And that moves me to skills. We had skills in Dark and Darker. I don't know about Underkeep. We, as a group, don't really know too much about Underkeep. We know what the devs are going to do, but I just threw this in there just in case they borrow that system, because it actually works pretty well. The skills I've listed here, and mind you, these could easily become techniques instead of skills if we just get rid of Dark and Darker style skills tied to the Q and E keys. Leap. You just jump. You jump fast, you jump far, you just launch yourself. Leap is cool. You want leap. Stunning Fist. You just throw a quick jab, it deals normal unarmed punch damage, but it applies heavy stagger. And it could include a disoriented status, similar to what we had with, like, getting drunk in Dark and Darker, you know, makes the screen all wobbly and hazy and stuff. I'm not saying that the devs have to add something like that, especially if it's going to be a pain in the ass to program. It'd just be a nice little thing to add to really sell a point that this is like, you're getting stunned, like they're just jabbing you in the face and disorienting you. Backflip, it's literally just Rogue's Tumble from Dark and Darker. It's fucking cool, it's badass. Monks should be able to do a cool backflip, and they should be able to do it all the time. That's awesome. Backflip, super cool, you want backflip. Flurry of Blows for short duration, double attack speed. This would kind of be like whatever Fighters had. I honestly quit playing the game so long I forgot what it was called in Dark and Darker. Basically, Flurry of Blows lets you just start unleashing attacks really fast for a short period of time. You're just really cranking out punches, or maybe you're speeding up your swing with a halberd, for instance, to really get in like an extra swing that wouldn't otherwise be possible. Then we move to Sundering Strike. Now, the monk's movement speed is severely reduced because they're tensing up their body, they're preparing to unleash a powerful blow, they're not moving particularly fast. And the next attack has a large amount of armor pen. You're really just fucking blasting somebody with your next attack. And that's not just left click unarmed attack, heavy attack, that also would include techniques. But they can also be used to destroy doors and chests. And one way I'd really like to see this used is if, like, you know, people are running away, they close the door, the monk pops Sundering Strike and just flying kicks the door, just busts the door open. That would be so fucking cool to see. I think we can all agree that's fucking badass. They shouldn't be going around smashing everything like a barbarian does, but giving them the ability to, on a cooldown, to just, like, bust open a chest or break down a door is pretty fucking dope, in my opinion. Push. That's literally what it does. Doesn't do damage, just two hands, straight out. You're just gonna push somebody. You're gonna knock them back a pretty decent distance, far enough to where, like, someone with a two-handed weapon can no longer reach you with that two-handed weapon. It's free, you just pop it, it's near instant. It can be used with two-handed weapons. You're just shoving people away from you. And that can be used to rescue your teammates as well. Then it says Techniques 1 and 2. That's like the Spell Memory 1 and 2 that was available to spellcasters in Dark and Darker. That's where you're going to store your techniques for the Technique Wheel. Again, this is just kind of a vague suggestion. We don't know if Underkeep is going to have the same skill system or a similar skill system. It could be that the Technique Wheel is just completely separate, and we don't even have skills, and all of these become techniques, right? But that's neither here nor there. The conclusion is that this isn't exactly my perfect dream monk, for instance. My dream monk would definitely be like a Drunken Fist practitioner. That's my favorite, like, Chinese martial art to practice. It really is, and it has been since I was about 20 years old. Ever since it finally clicked with me and I finally understood it. It's awesome. It's great. It's my favorite. I'm not recommending that at all. It doesn't belong in the game at all. And I want to make this very clear. It doesn't belong in the game. Now, if you want to add a perk that gives monks bonuses for drinking alcohol, kind of like how Bard got in Dark and Darker, that's fine.
but I don't want to see Drunken Fist techniques and all the crazy wacky animations and bullshit. That doesn't belong, okay? And I admit that, despite me saying that that's what I want. That's my favorite shit. That's my shit, okay? It doesn't belong here. I just wanted to make a fantasy-friendly monk that kind of applies and fits the themes and the roles, and it should be fun for other people, not just for me. And I want it to be fair, I want it to be balanced, but I want it to be dynamic and exciting to play. But again, I do recommend that monk be the weakest class in the game. Like, I legitimately mean that. Like I said, super scary at low levels when nobody has good gear. The monk should just beat the fuck out of you and take your fucking lunch money, which isn't going to be a lot. But once you get into those, you know, those juiced lobbies where guys have full plate and like a magic sword, monk's going to start to struggle a bit, you know? Not that I believe stat checking should be in the game. I want to make that very clear. I don't think people should be able to 100% stat check monks. It's just monks are going to have to work a lot harder and really make use of their techniques and spacing and game knowledge to actually win fights against armored opponents with serious weapons, you know? After that, I got a list of big asks. These are things that I personally want to see in the game. Like, I want to see ledge grabbing and climbing for monks. I don't think every other class should have that. I just think it'd be cool for monks to have. Throwing rocks. Please, Underdark needs rocks. They don't need to be good. Let me highlight that. There we go. I got it finally. Fuck. I want to throw rocks in the fucking game. They don't have to be good. They can do pee-pee-poo-poo damage, but at some point when I'm playing a wizard and I know someone is low health, I want to pull a fucking rock out of my pocket and hit them with Magician's Brick. Holy shit, I need this. Let me throw rocks in this fucking game. I don't care if it's bad. I just want to do it. I want fun little things like that. I want playable skeletons. I don't care if Dark and Darker... Fucking, you were kidding me. There we go. So yeah, I want skeletons. Let me play skeletons. Holy shit, I love skeletons so much. You can't even begin to understand. Ever since I played Killer Instinct back in 1995, Spinal awakened something in me as a child. I love skeletons. Please let me be skeletons. Let's see. I would recommend a knockdown mechanic. It would actually feel bad, so I don't strongly recommend it, but it would be, you know, cool to see, especially if like PvP or PvE mobs, like bosses for instance, had like a powerful technique that just knocked you on your ass for a second. That could cause some really terrifying situations. Maybe monks could make use of it, you know, maybe barbarians or fighters, you know, to a much less potent degree. You know, you get knocked down, you immediately get back up. Kind of like Stagger Plus. But I understand that if it becomes spammable, it could become a problem, so don't really worry about it. It's just kind of something I want to see. Fucking Rangers? Don't do any of the dumb shit that Dark and Darker did with Rangers. That's what I want to see in the game. I don't want to see fucking spears on Rangers and not on Barbarians. That, like, look at this shit. They don't need bear traps, obviously. They don't need weapons that Barbarians should have, yet don't for some reason, and also give that weapon bonuses, because that's what they did. They gave Rangers access to spears if you took a perk, but also it made the spears really fucking strong for Rangers for no fucking reason, and I don't want to hear the dumb, lame, 12 IQ excuse that, oh, well, you people use spears for boar hunting. It's not the same as stabbing a fucking person who's trying to actually fight you. It's not even remotely the fucking same. Hunting and fighting are very fucking different. There's a reason why when it comes to training to hunt, like even with guns, you don't do the same, you know, drills practicing long-distance shooting to drop a deer as you do practicing your concealed carry to pull a gun out and shoot someone who's trying to rob you. They're completely fucking different. Rangers didn't need fucking big-ass, long-ass spears that aren't going to help them in the fucking forest, okay? They didn't need that. And then you're going to tell me Barbarian can't figure out how to use a fucking pointy stick? You can't get more simple than a pointy stick. Rangers shouldn't be allowed to infinitely run around and kite people and heal themselves while full sprinting. Everyone else had to slow their fucking roll to heal themselves, except Fighter with their second wind. Why the fuck did Rangers have fucking everything? They shouldn't have everything. They should be a support class. Let them hit hard with their bows. Go ahead and let them. But the name Ranger does not come from being a ranged attacker. It does not come from range, the concept. It comes from them being out in the fucking wilderness. They're survival experts, not fucking murderers, not snipers. Well, I guess they're kind of snipers, but you get the point. Don't let them spam the shit out of arrows. Don't let them infinitely kite. Give them a fucking sword and make them actually competent in close quarters combat, but don't let them be nearly as fucking annoying as they were in Dark and Darker. I also advocate against fucking what do you call it? A stamina bar. That doesn't belong for normal combat actions. If you want to use like resources to limit spell casting or monk techniques, if you want to, add a system like that for fighter techniques or abilities, like use resources for abilities. Don't use them for swinging your sticks or running around and moving and shit. It doesn't actually improve gameplay. Every single concern everyone brings up that they think stamina will fix won't actually fix those problems. Like, one of the examples people brought up was, in Dark and Darker, people would just strip their gear and, gain a bunch of movement speed and be able to reset. Why are they allowed to instantaneously doff their gear? Don't let them instantly take their fucking armor off, put it in their inventory, and run away at full speed. Just don't let them do that. Just make it so that it takes time to unequip. It's not that complicated. That's a super simple, easy fix that instantly solves that problem. Stamina won't actually do what you think it's going to do, I'm sorry. And my final and most crucial big ask is to not employ the modern industry standards for moderation. Mean words don't actually hurt people, but malignant narcissists who actually weaponize compassion do. And I want to make this very clear. People that throw around the word toxicity tend to be the most toxic people. They're dishonest, manipulative scumbags who take pleasure in ruining things for other people. And dudes that call you mean names on the internet never actually hurt anyone. They don't get you banned from the game. Just let them say mean things to each other. It's not the end of the world. The internet was unironically a better place when everyone called me the N-word and had sex with my mom last night. Legitimately. But that's the whole document. I went over it. You don't have to read it yourself now because I made this stupid-ass video. I went on too long. I hope you guys like some of the ideas I presented here for Monk, and I do want to make it very clear. I tried to keep things simple and less complex in order to make implementation as smooth and easy as possible. And I do feel genuinely guilty about, throwing in wacky things like the cloud hands and, the stifling step and stuff. Like, I don't want to try and demand that the devs put in the amount of work it takes to make 5 classes just to make one, which is why I tried to lean more into simplicity in this design document. But either way, I hope somebody likes some of these recommendations. I'd like to hear your comments and concerns. And I'm really looking forward to this game. I really can't wait for a game that was like Dark and Darker, but good. And I'm going to be very honest here. One of the big things that we really need to recognize is, the dev team needs to not listen to players as much as people would like. And I'm sorry that this is going to upset some of you. Most people who play games and consume games don't actually understand games. They don't understand the psychology of play. They don't understand development. They don't understand the mechanics of the systems that they engage with constantly. It's why so many people kind of spread this axiomatic belief that, or they axiomatically spread this belief that buffs are always better than nerfs. There's no, actual evidence to support it. Actually, all evidence that they use to support it actually refutes their claims, but people still believe it because it feels good. Most people that consume any product don't really understand the products they're consuming. So please don't listen to players too much, especially once the game is actively in development. Take everything with a big heap of salt, is what I'm saying. That wasn't written in the document, but I figure that was just important to bring up. And you guys all have a good one.